Hello and welcome to another video. So today we are actually taking a look at my Endless Artifact deck. This is a deck I did a video on about the start of this expansion. We're now a few weeks in at this point, and I really just wanted to follow up on this deck. I haven't actually made any adjustments, at least I don't think I did since I did that video. It's been, like I said, a little while. But this is the deck I actually qualified for the Grand Prix with, for at least the first stage as of making this video. It's been pretty solid. I've had a little bit of a letdown in the last few games, but overall it still does quite well. Really just got to avoid some of that bad RNG. If you can avoid that, you're pretty good. I mean, even an average hand with this can beat out most mid swords, at least in my experience so far. Unfortunately, I don't think I've got a video of that for you guys, because that was about, a few days ago when I originally did that. And roughly most things that you're finding now seem to be stuck around blood for some reason. I'm seeing a lot more blood in the last day or so than previously. Still a reasonable amount of sword, but not quite as much as I was before this. So honestly, just perfectly works for me. That's what Portal's like. If you can find a deck that you can be comfortable with and play with, it's quite fun. Of course, this one doesn't run, Manga Legacy or a few other things that you could definitely put in the deck. I don't see why you couldn't. And obviously no Hikarabe. I do prefer Spinaria, mainly because its ping effect I think is superior for what I want to use it for. Most of the time I'm using it either on 5 or in late game when I can spam artifacts and clear out whole boards without actually wasting anything, which is good. So that's why I prefer to use Spinaria as a 2-of instead of Hikarabe, which a lot of people use. But other than that, really just running the Knower of History as your kind of big card. It does an amazing job. Fortunately I did just click out of that there, whoops. Anyway, back on track, we've got the God Bullet Golem, great as a 1-of, works well to try and get those finishes out, which helps a fair bit when you are running Knower of History. Everything else is just artifact generation with a few different win cons, so you can go for the Saphira win con, you can literally go for Dez and just spam board until they can't handle it anymore. You've got your Radiant artifacts, of course, like I mentioned, you've got Prime artifact, and then also you have God Bullet as an extra win condition. Mainly you just have so many options with this deck that depending on what kind of matchup you're in, you can go down any kind of route nearly. The only route you can't use with this deck is wards, because it's the only thing this deck doesn't tend to run. Of course, I do have other Portal decks that do have more ward centrics, and then they allow you to do a little bit more variation. Normally you're focusing mainly on draw or rush with this deck, and also storm if you are in more of a late game. So we'll get right into the video and check it out. So first up we have Nexus. Nexus is going to try and beat us down, so Portal versus Portal does give me at least some gauge on how this will perform. Portal is still quite a strong deck, and most people are running a more mid-range variation of Portal compared to this one. I don't know. This one I can't really say it is fully mid-range. You tend to either be closing super early or closing super late, not really in the middle of the game, where most mid-range decks tend to do the best. I tend to find that this deck, for me, usually if you can secure the turn 1 to 3 or secure the turn 7 to 10, that's where you're kind of winning. So you're either going for your super late control, where you're just spamming artifacts for late game, with the mid game being most of your draw or setup phase, and the early game being kind of just spam the board with as much as you can, making it hard for your opponent to really build anything. Of course, we get a pretty nice setup, almost optimal. If we had had Hamlin, would have been basically a perfect opener in this match. I really love having the Icarus into Mecha Soldier into Hamlin. That just allows you to drop so much stuff on turn 4 that it's absolutely crazy, and you get a fair amount of value out of all those cards too normally. So to go for the Ancient Artifact and trade, with a couple damage to the face, and just a small Knower of History to throw that Prime Artifact into our deck. And since we don't have Dez, it's going to be a little tricky to work this out, but you really want to just put as much pressure into this game as you can without wasting too much of your hand. Trying to get the most value out of things is usually the way to go. Of course, you can't always do that and do just need to go wide, so that's why you play things like Knower of History before you can take advantage of the Evolve. Fortunately, they didn't decide to kill Knower of History anyway, focusing more on the 2-3, probably so I can't double trade with it and kill 2 things off for the price of 1. I mean, if you can trade 2 for 1, you're doing pretty well. That's some pretty good trade value when you can do that.
Go, connect with her.
And then being able to go and just kill this off, pretty low cost, and get 4 damage to the face, why not? No need to spam artifacts yet.
You might say I'm a genius.
Of course, at least since we have Saphira, we can start kind of getting things down. So if we can just get as much pressure into the game now, we should be okay. Of course, we do have a really nice prime there that we can take advantage of. Double analyzing, that's going to do some work for them, that's for sure. So definitely playing, you know, of course, very similar decks. Artifact portals tend to have very similar early game, pretty similar late game. It's more of just what kind of variation you're looking for in your deck. It's normally a 1 to 2 card variation where you just kind of really shift the focus of what you're aiming to both put into your deck and draw out of your deck. So like you'll see Manga Legacy a lot of the time normally leans more towards board clears and dealing with something like Sword, whereas a deck like mine focuses more on spamming board as much as possible with artifacts and not actually having to worry about dropping something big to clear the board once. You're normally focusing on dropping as many little things as you can for as much value. Of course they get the Deus Ex Machina, which is pretty good for them, not so good for me, but at least with double prime artifact we can start spamming these onto the board and trading them off. It's also great, Acceleradium plus prime is probably one of my favourite combos.
The gears of fate still turn.
So we are going to be able to put a lot of pressure down with these prime artifacts. I mean, dealing with 10 stat worth of value on both attack and defense is going to be really difficult turn after turn. Although, if any class can do it, it is Portal that can really deal with that, so it's going to be pretty close based on my draws. Lucky for me, not doing too bad. We are going to get a full clear plus the Ancient Line. Oh, sorry, Magisteel Line. Ancient Line is a completely different card. So many lines in this game, guys. You wouldn't think they'd have so many cards with Line in the title. So not too bad. Of course, that does allow something to be banished. Not something I'm too concerned about, though. If they want to waste their whole turn banishing stuff, I'm not too concerned by that. Of course, they do go for the Hekarabe and going for a pretty aggressive stance here. But they are forced to deal with these artifacts, and dealing with them now isn't going to help them next turn. They do just get to come down again and have to be answered over and over again. Now, as long as this line can stick, we can at least get rid of that 4/4 nicely without too much of an issue. Of course, I would love to have gotten Acceleradium, but fortunately you can't have everything you need, but that Spinari is definitely going to help. It is going to allow me to remove both of these followers basically for free. So really, all I did was use the Substitution Puppet, and then Spinari's value is completely free. Playing it out, no matter what, I probably would have played it anyway, but this way I can guarantee a full board clear and set up a really wide board. Also means they've got to now deal with Spinaria, which, Manga Legacy, good option for dealing with this. If there was any card that could in Portal, it would be that card, so I'm not too shocked by that. But again, that does just mean my artifacts are going to come back, so it only really buys them some time. On the flip side though, they're getting very close to being able to use Saphira as a very aggressive play, which could be dangerous to me. Luckily that draw was great. Of course there was a fair few cards that I could have drawn that would have killed it off this Manga Legacy quite effectively. I had myriad of artifacts in the deck. I've got a few other good cards that really would have put a lot of pressure down on them, but that one really just helps us get rid of a couple things, so that's always nice. So we've still got our Otherworld Rift, we've got more Spheres, we've got artifacts that could have been drawn there. Plenty of things. Their Ancient Artifact finally doing something. So it looks like they are going to use those to remove this. So it is getting quite dangerous. They've played a lot of artifacts now, and unfortunately I wasn't keeping count. If you ever go up against a Portal and you realize you're going to be going into a long game, definitely a good idea to keep count of how many artifacts they have had destroyed. Because I'm sure they'd be at over 10 artifacts destroyed this game so far. I'm sure if you guys go back and count them, it'll be well and truly that number by now. I'd actually be surprised. So if anyone does want to go back and count those artifacts, go for it. I'd love to know exactly how many artifacts were played at this point in the game. If not over the whole game, would really interest me on my opponent's side. I know I played a fair few, and my Saphira does reflect that. It's not quite enough yet, but it is getting fairly close, I believe, to being a lethal situation, actually. So we'll actually check the Saphira here and see exactly how much it's got. So 11, so very, very close. I was actually only 1 off being able to win the game that turn. If I could have just had that Saphira work for me. So the Ironforge Fighter, not too much of an issue. Of course, if they kill this artifact without banishing it, we win. If they banish it, they've pretty much won the game at that point.
Awaken.
I would have to draw extremely well if they banished both of these. Luckily for me, that isn't the case. And they either remove this, or they lose. Either way, they straight up lose. Removing this artifact would win me the game. Not removing the artifact wins me the game. So, either way, it was going to end with them losing from this board space. But I was really happy with that game. It really kept me on my toes without being able to use Des. So it does show that you can still win without that draw. Since that last game was just a little bit long, we'll go with this one, which was just a little shorter. I mean, you can be quite aggressive with this deck, and when it works, it works. I mean, taking down Dragon is something that you can struggle with if they have a pretty decent start off. But if you have about the same kind of hand, usually you can topple them pretty well now. You only really got to watch out for things like Frenzied Drake or Canyon that are going to sap your resources. But in most cases, it's not too bad. I tend to actually lose mostly against Blood with this deck, which isn't surprising. Blood is so aggressive that unless you have absolutely every card you need to counter them, it's very hard to make a big comeback against Blood. So we start off with basically the ideal hand. Icarus into Mechanic into the Hamlin, so... Sorry, Machine Soldier. Mechanic's the other one. So many cards based around stuff like that, you lose track of all their titles probably. But either way, pretty solid. We can go straight into Hamlin, Excel, Artifact if we want to. Completely remove the 2-5 and the 2-2 from the board. And get a pretty solid amount of damage in at the same time, really not causing any issues for us. That's what I mean by a great start. This is the kind of hand I actually love playing out. It would have been only better if my second Excel was actually a Does. If that was the case, you would have been laughing at this hand. So this is what I would consider above average hand. Guard hand would have been having Does, maybe even Spinaria, so you have a really good curve. Or a Biofab Spinaria, that would have been really nice too. So it's definitely better hands, but this is definitely above average. Average, I probably wouldn't have had an Excel. I would have just been forced to use those 3 in combination and go that way instead. But if you're looking to mulligan, I don't always recommend hard mulligan for Does. If you have a hand like this, there's just no point mulliganing for it straight off the bat. You may as well just wait until you can draw it out. But if you have absolute trash in your hand, yeah, you hard mulligan for whatever you can get. Mainly looking for any decent 2 to 3 drop cards that can really be played out, or just looking for any early game banishments, things like that that can really help you out in the match. Especially against most classes now. There's very few matches where you're not looking for that early game. Mostly Haven is the only one where you're really not looking for a lot of early. And you're looking for more of a solid tempo draw, so you're looking for a 2, 3, 4 drop, 5 drop sort of curve that can beat them out early. So you are looking for some low drops, but you're not looking for everything super low that deals with super early stuff, so you don't need to worry about banishes against Haven mostly, unless they are going Snow White, in which case, you know, sometimes it's good to just secure that banishment, at least one of. Fortunately, they couldn't clear all this. The RNG on them was absolutely crazy. If you saw that RNG just there, absolutely massive. They missed every single shot to kill these followers off, and that really did win me the game very easily, although I wasn't too concerned in general because my cards were quite good. So if you guys did enjoy this video, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content. You will find this deck list in the description below. You can also check out my previous video on the channel. If you just go back about a week in the channel, you'll see the previous Endless Artifact deck if you're interested in that, or just check out any of my other videos. We have daily content every single day, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, so do be sure to check it out, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.